The silence after "I love you too, sweetheart" should have been peaceful. Violet Sterling had just finished her evening call with her husband Ryan, the same routine they'd shared for 3 years of marriage. She was about to set her phone aside when she heard it, another voice, muffled but unmistakably familiar. "Is she still taking the pills you've been giving her?" Violet's blood turned to ice. That was Nicole's voice. Her stepsister Nicole, who had been so supportive during her father's recent death, so understanding about Violet's grief-induced episodes. Ryan's voice came through clearly now, apparently unaware his phone was still connected. "Yeah, she doesn't suspect anything. The doctor thinks she's having a real breakdown. Perfect timing with her dad dying, makes everything look natural. Good. How much longer before we can have her committed? I'm tired of pretending to care about her mental health. Soon. I've got the paperwork ready. Once she's declared incompetent, I get control of everything. The house, her father's business, all of it. The inheritance alone is worth $2 million. Violet's hands shook as she pressed the phone closer to her ear. This couldn't be real. This had to be some terrible nightmare. What about the pills? Won't they show up in tests? Nicole asked. Nah, they're out of her system in 12 hours. Besides, who's going to question it? Everyone's seen her episodes. Her own family thinks she's losing it. Nicole laughed, a sound that used to bring Violet comfort during childhood visits. You're brilliant, baby. I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore. I'm sick of playing the concerned stepsister. Just a little longer. The commitment hearing is set for next week. After that, we're free. She'll be locked away and we'll have everything we ever wanted. The call finally ended. Violet stared at her phone screen for what felt like hours, though the clock showed only minutes had passed. Her mind raced through the past 6 months since her father's death. The strange dizzy spells that came out of nowhere. The confusion and memory lapses that made her question her own sanity. The way Ryan would look at her with such concerned eyes, holding her close and whispering that everything would be okay. It was all fake. Every tender moment, every reassuring word, every time he held her while she cried, it was all part of an elaborate plan to steal her life. She thought about Nicole, her father's second wife's daughter, who had moved to town 6 months ago claiming she wanted to be closer to family after Violet's father passed. Nicole had been there for every episode, always ready with a tissue and a sympathetic ear. She'd even suggested Violet see a therapist, recommended the doctor who had been so quick to prescribe medication. The medication. Violet rushed to the kitchen and found the bottle Ryan had been giving her daily. For anxiety, he'd said. The doctor thinks it will help with your grief. She trusted him completely, never even looked at the label closely. Now she could see it was made out to a name she didn't recognize, and the side effects listed included confusion, memory loss, and hallucinations. They had been poisoning her, systematically destroying her mind while playing the role of loving caretakers. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Sorry honey, had to take a work call. See you at home soon. Love you. The casual normalcy of it made her stomach turn. How could someone lie so effortlessly? How could they look her in the eye every day knowing what they were doing to her? Violet walked through their house, her house inherited from her father, seeing it with new eyes. Every photo of her and Ryan, every gift he'd given her, every corner where they'd shared what she thought were genuine moments. It was all contaminated now. She remembered the conversation she'd overheard just weeks ago, when she'd thought she was having another episode. Ryan talking to someone on the phone about making sure the timeline worked out. She'd been confused, disoriented from whatever they'd been giving her, and when she'd asked about it later, he'd looked at her with such patient concern. Sweetheart, there was no phone call. You were having another spell. Maybe we should call Dr. Harrison. Dr. Harrison, who was probably in on it too. The doctor who'd been so quick to suggest that Violet's grief was manifesting as serious mental illness. Who'd recommended immediate intervention and had already mentioned that some patients needed residential care. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Her father had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving her his successful construction business and a substantial life insurance policy. Ryan had encouraged her to make him the beneficiary of everything, just in case something happens to you too, honey. I couldn't bear to lose you. She changed her will just 3 months ago. The front door opened and Violet heard Ryan's familiar footsteps. Her loving, devoted husband who brought her flowers every Friday. Who held her hair back when the medication made her sick. Who looked at their friends and family with such brave sadness when discussing her condition. Violet? I'm home, he called out, his voice warm and affectionate. She took a deep breath and walked toward the sound of his voice, her mind already working. They thought they were so clever, so careful. They thought she was just a weak, grieving woman who could be easily manipulated and discarded. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, forcing a smile as Ryan pulled her into his arms. "How was your day?" The next morning, Violet woke up with crystal clarity for the first time in months. No fog, no confusion, no strange dizzy spells that had become her new normal. She'd flushed the pills down the toilet the night before and replaced them with similar-looking vitamins from her medicine cabinet. Ryan was already dressed for work, holding her usual morning coffee. "Here you go, honey. Don't forget your medication." She accepted the coffee with a grateful smile, noting the slightly bitter taste that she'd attributed to a new brand. Now she knew better. "Thank you. What would I do without you?" "You'll never have to find out," he said, kissing her forehead. The gesture that once made her feel cherished now made her skin crawl. After he left, Violet began her investigation. She started with their shared computer, finding Ryan's password embarrassingly easy to crack, Nicole's birthday. His email revealed months of correspondence with Dr. Harrison about her deteriorating condition. Messages with Nicole discussing timing and logistics. Even communications with a lawyer about commitment procedures. The depth of their planning was staggering. They'd been orchestrating this for almost a year, starting even before her father's death. They'd identified her inheritance potential and crafted the perfect storm of circumstances to steal everything. She found receipts for the fake medication, purchased online from a shady pharmacy. Records of payments to Dr. Harrison that went far beyond normal consultation fees. Even a draft of the legal documents that would transfer her assets to Ryan upon her commitment. But it was the personal messages between Ryan and Nicole that cut deepest. "I can barely stand touching her anymore," Ryan had written. "She's so pathetic when she cries about her dad. Makes me sick." "Just think about the money," Nicole had replied. $2 million plus the business. "We can disappear after this, start fresh somewhere tropical. Can't wait." Sometimes I want to just tell her the truth and watch her face when she realizes how stupid she's been. Violet printed everything, storing copies in multiple locations. Then she called in sick to her part-time job at the local library and began the next phase of her research. The records she found at the county courthouse painted a different picture of her supposedly devoted husband. Ryan had been married twice before, both marriages ending in mysterious circumstances involving his wife's mental health issues. One ex-wife had disappeared entirely after being committed. The other had died in a psychiatric facility under questionable circumstances. Her hands trembled as she read the police reports. Ryan Mitchell wasn't even his real name. He was Ryan Thompson, wanted in 2 other states for fraud and identity theft. The man she'd married didn't legally exist. Nicole's background was equally shocking. She'd been fired from 3 previous jobs for embezzlement and had a sealed juvenile record for poisoning a family pet. The sweet, caring stepsister act was as fake as everything else about their situation. By the time Violet returned home, she'd mapped out their entire operation. They were professionals, predators who specialized in targeting vulnerable women with assets. She wasn't their first victim, and she wouldn't be their last if she didn't stop them. That evening she performed perfectly for Ryan. She took her medication with the coffee he prepared, complained of a headache and confusion, and let him comfort her with practiced concern. "Maybe I should stay home tomorrow," he suggested, stroking her hair. "You seem to be having a rough spell." "No, don't worry about me. I know how important your work is." The lie came easily now. She was learning their game. After he fell asleep, Violet slipped out to meet with her father's old lawyer, James Porter. She'd called him earlier, claiming she needed to discuss some estate matters. What she really needed was someone she could trust with the truth. Porter's office was empty except for security lighting, but he'd agreed to meet her there after hours. He was a kind man in his 60s who'd known her family for decades. "Violet, you sounded upset on the phone. What's wrong?" She handed him the printed evidence, watching his expression change from concern to horror as he read through the documents. "My God," he whispered. "How long has this been going on?" "Months. They've been drugging me, making me think I was losing my mind. They plan to have me committed next week so Ryan can take everything." Porter set the papers down with shaking hands. "This is criminal conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder. We need to call the police immediately." "Not yet," Violet said firmly. "If we move too fast they'll just disappear and do this to someone else. I want to make sure they pay for everything they've done, not just what we can prove right now." "Violet, this is dangerous. If they realize you know." "They won't. I'm going to beat them at their own game." But I need help, and I need someone who can protect my assets while I work. Porter studied her face in the dim light. You're not the same broken woman who came to my office last month to change her will. That woman was being poisoned. This is who I really am. He nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? Violet outlined her plan. Porter would quietly reverse her recent will changes, citing a legal technicality that required new documentation. He'd also start discreet inquiries about Ryan's true identity and past crimes. Most importantly, he'd begin the process of protecting her assets from any future claims. There's something else, she said. I want to hire a private investigator. Someone who can document everything they do from here on out. I know someone. Very discreet, very thorough. As Violet prepared to leave, Porter touched her arm gently. Your father would be proud of you. He always said you had his strength just hidden under all that kindness. They're about to find out just how much strength I have. Driving home through the empty streets, Violet felt a cold satisfaction settling over her. Ryan and Nicole thought they were master manipulators, expert at reading and controlling their victims. They had no idea they were about to become the victims themselves. Tomorrow she would begin to turn their own tactics against them. And by the time she was finished, they would understand exactly what it felt like to have their lives systematically destroyed. Violet spent the next 3 days perfecting her performance while secretly gathering more evidence. She let Ryan and Nicole see exactly what they expected, a confused, increasingly unstable woman whose grip on reality was slipping day by day. I keep having these strange dreams, she told Nicole during lunch at their usual cafe. Ryan keeps telling me they're not real, but they feel so vivid. Nicole leaned forward with practiced concern. What kind of dreams, honey? People plotting against me. Conversations I'm sure I heard but Ryan says never happened. It's like my mind is creating elaborate stories. Violet let her voice shake slightly. Sometimes I wonder if I'm really losing my sanity. Oh, Violet. Nicole reached across to squeeze her hand. You've been through so much trauma. It's completely understandable that your mind is struggling to process everything. The sympathy felt like acid on Violet's skin, but she forced grateful tears. You've been so good to me through all this. I don't know what I'd do without you and Ryan. We're family. We'll always be here for you. Family. The word was laughable coming from someone who'd been planning to destroy her life. That afternoon, Violet met with the private investigator Porter had recommended. Janet Mills was a former police detective in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I've been watching your husband and stepsister for 2 days, Mills reported. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. They meet at the Riverside Motel every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Your husband's been liquidating assets from 3 different accounts, moving money to offshore banks. Can you prove it? Mills slid a manila envelope across the table. Photos, bank records, hotel receipts. There's enough here to put them both away for fraud and identity theft. Your husband's real name is Ryan Thompson, wanted in Nevada and California for similar schemes. Violet studied the photographs of Ryan and Nicole together, their body language intimate and comfortable. They looked like a couple who'd been together for years, not people conducting a secret affair. How long do you think this has been going on? She asked. Based on what I've uncovered, they've been working together for at least 2 years. They probably targeted you long before your father's death. Nicole moving here wasn't coincidence, it was reconnaissance. The revelation hit Violet like a physical blow. Her entire relationship with Ryan had been a lie from the very beginning. Every kiss, every shared laugh, every moment she'd thought was genuine, it was all part of an elaborate con game. There's something else, Mills continued. I found records of Ryan's previous victims. You're not his first wife, and you're not Nicole's first target either. They're a team and they're good at what they do. What happened to the other women? One committed suicide in a psychiatric facility. Another disappeared completely, police suspect murder but could never prove it. A third survived but lost everything and had to rebuild her life from scratch. Violet closed her eyes, imagining herself in a mental institution, drugged and helpless while Ryan and Nicole enjoyed her stolen money. The thought made her physically ill. We have enough to arrest them now, Mills said gently. You don't have to put yourself through any more of this. Yes, I do. Violet's voice was steady despite the horror she felt. They've destroyed other women's lives, and they'll keep doing it until someone stops them permanently. I want them to experience everything they put me through. That evening, Violet played her part perfectly when Ryan came home. She mentioned seeing things that weren't there, complained about memory gaps, and let him find her medication, scattered on the bathroom floor where she'd supposedly dropped them in confusion. "I'm scared, Ryan," she whispered, allowing him to hold her while she fake cried. "What if I really am losing my mind?" "Sure, it's okay. I'm going to take care of you." His voice was so convincing, so full of false compassion. "I think it might be time to talk to Dr. Harrison about more intensive treatment." There it was, the setup for her commitment. "What do you mean?" "Just temporary, honey. Somewhere you can get the help you need in a safe environment. I've been doing research and there are some excellent facilities that specialize in trauma-related mental health issues." Violet let herself look terrified. "You want to send me away?" "Not forever. Just until you're feeling better. I can't bear to watch you suffer like this." She clung to him, playing the desperate wife who couldn't imagine life without her devoted husband's support. Inside, she was calculating exactly how to turn his plan against him. The next morning, while Ryan was at work, probably meeting with lawyers about her commitment, Violet made her final preparations. She'd already moved her inheritance to an untraceable account, left detailed instructions with Porter about her real whereabouts, and arranged for Mills to continue surveillance. Her phone rang. It was her best friend Bethany, calling from across the country where she was finishing her medical residency. "Violet, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. How are you holding up?" Bethany was the one person who might be able to see through Ryan's lies if given the chance. She was also the one person who knew Violet well enough to recognize that something was seriously wrong. It's been hard," Violet said carefully. "Ryan thinks I might need professional help." "What kind of help? You sounded fine when we talked last month." "I've been having episodes. Memory problems, confusion. The doctor says it's related to Dad's death, but it's getting worse." There was a long pause. "Violet, what doctor? And what kind of episodes?" Violet could hear the medical professional in Bethany's voice, the sharp attention that came with years of training to spot inconsistencies in patient stories. "Dr. Harrison. He's been treating me for anxiety and depression. But lately I can't remember conversations, I see things that aren't there. Ryan's been so patient, but I think he's scared. Send me your medical records. All of them. And I want to talk to this Dr. Harrison myself." "Bethany, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. Something about this doesn't sound right. Grief doesn't typically present with the symptoms you're describing, not at this level. I want to rule out any physical causes before we assume it's psychological." After hanging up, Violet smiled for the first time in days. She'd just given herself the perfect ally. Someone with the medical knowledge to expose Ryan's drugging scheme and the legal authority to challenge any commitment proceedings. The trap was almost ready. Soon, Ryan and Nicole would discover what it felt like to have their perfect plan turned against them. The commitment hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. Violet had 3 days to disappear. She spent Tuesday morning at the bank, withdrawing the maximum daily limit from her personal account while wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. The security cameras would show her there, establishing her presence in town right up until her disappearance. "Going somewhere special?" the teller asked, making conversation as she processed the large withdrawal. "My husband and I are planning a surprise vacation," Violet lied smoothly. "He's been so stressed with work lately." That afternoon, she drove to a storage facility 2 towns over and rented a unit under a false name, paying 6 months in advance with cash. Inside, she placed copies of all her evidence, extra clothes and emergency supplies. If something went wrong with her plan, she'd need a safe place to regroup. Wednesday evening, Ryan came home with flowers and takeout from her favorite restaurant. "I thought we could have a nice quiet dinner together," he said. Before you start getting the help you need." The Last Supper with his condemned victim. "How thoughtful. Dr. Harrison thinks the facility will be good for you," he continued as they ate. "It's peaceful, very private. You'll be able to focus on getting better without any stress or distractions." "How long will I be there?" Violet asked, playing the scared wife perfectly. "As long as it takes. Don't worry about the cost or anything practical. I'll handle all of that. You just focus on healing." Of course he would handle the cost. With her power of attorney and access to her accounts, he could pay for her imprisonment with her own money while liquidating everything else. "Will you visit me?" Ryan's smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course, sweetheart. As often as they allow." Another lie. He was probably planning to disappear with Nicole the moment she was locked away. Thursday morning, Violet put her plan into motion. She called Nicole, her voice shaky and panicked. "Something terrible happened," she sobbed into the phone. "I think someone's been in our house. Things are moved around and I keep hearing voices. Ryan's at work and I'm scared to be alone." "I'll be right over," Nicole said immediately. 20 minutes later, Nicole arrived to find Violet pacing frantically around the living room, clearly in the middle of what appeared to be a severe breakdown. "They're watching me," Violet whispered, pointing at the windows. "The voices keep telling me about terrible things Ryan's done, but that can't be real, right? My mind is making it all up." Nicole guided her to the couch with practiced gentleness. "Violet, honey, you're having an episode. There's no one watching you and Ryan hasn't done anything wrong. Your mind is playing tricks on you because of the grief and stress." "But I heard him on the phone talking about having me committed, talking about money." Violet let her voice trail off in confusion. Nicole's eyes sharpened. "What phone call?" "I don't know. Maybe I dreamed it. Everything feels like a dream lately. I can't tell what's real anymore. That's why you need professional help. Ryan's trying to do what's best for you." They talked for another hour, with Nicole skillfully reinforcing all the lies they'd built about Violet's mental state. When Nicole finally left, she was completely convinced that Violet was having a complete breakdown and would be easily committed the next day. That night, Violet waited until Ryan was deeply asleep, then slipped out of the house. She'd parked a rental car 3 blocks away earlier in the week, registered under a fake identity Mills had helped her establish. Her suitcase was already in the trunk, along with cash and prepaid cell phones. She drove to a small motel 50 miles away, paying cash and checking in under her false name. From there she called Mills. "It's time," she said simply. "Are you sure about this? Once you disappear, there's no going back to your old life." "My old life was a lie. I'm ready to start over." The next morning Ryan would wake up to find her gone. Her car would be discovered abandoned at a hiking trail known for its dangerous cliffs and sudden weather changes. Her phone would be found smashed on the rocks below, along with some torn pieces of clothing Mills had planted there. To everyone else, it would look like Violet had finally succumbed to her mental illness and either fallen accidentally or jumped intentionally. Ryan would play the grieving husband perfectly, while Nicole comforted him through his tragic loss. But there would be no body to find and no death certificate to file immediately. That would give Violet time to execute the next phase of her plan. From her motel room, she watched the local news coverage of her disappearance. Ryan's performance was masterful. The devastated husband who tried so hard to get his wife the help she needed, only to lose her tragically. "She'd been struggling so much since her father's death," he told the reporter, his voice breaking convincingly. "I keep thinking I should have done more, should have gotten her help sooner." Nicole stood beside him, playing the grieving stepsister. Violet was such a gentle soul. She couldn't handle the pain of losing her father. "We tried everything to help her, but sometimes love isn't enough." The lies came so easily to them. They'd probably been rehearsing this scene for months. But Violet noticed something they didn't expect anyone else to see. In the background of one shot, she caught a glimpse of Ryan and Nicole's hands briefly touching, their fingers intertwining for just a moment before they remembered to maintain their act. Mills had caught it too, and several similar moments over the past weeks. When the time came, those small gestures would help prove their conspiracy. Phase 1 was complete. Violet Sterling was officially missing, presumed dead. Now it was time for Ryan and Nicole to discover that their victim was far from helpless. The real game was just beginning. From her motel room, Violet monitored Ryan and Nicole's reaction to her disappearance. They maintained their grief-stricken act perfectly for the first week, but Mill's surveillance revealed their true behavior when they thought no one was watching. 3 days after Violet vanished, Ryan and Nicole were spotted celebrating at an upscale restaurant 2 towns over. Mill's long-range camera caught them toasting with champagne, laughing, and behaving like a couple who just won the lottery. Which, in their minds, they had. Violet studied the photographs while planning her counterattack. They thought they'd eliminated her, cleared the path to her fortune. Now she would show them what a real predator looked like. She started small. Anonymous tips to Ryan's business clients about irregularities in his accounts. Nothing specific enough to trace back to her, but detailed enough to make them ask uncomfortable questions. The first client called Ryan directly, questioning some missing funds that Violet had discovered during her investigation. Through Mill's phone surveillance, she heard Ryan scramble to explain discrepancies he couldn't account for. "There must be some mistake in the bookkeeping," Ryan told his client smoothly. "With everything that's happened with my wife, I've been distracted. Let me review the files and get back to you." But there were no files to review, because Ryan had been stealing from his clients to fund his lifestyle with Nicole. The missing money was already in their offshore accounts, waiting for the perfect moment to disappear. Next, Violet targeted Nicole's workplace. She'd learned that Nicole worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious investment firm, managing retirement accounts for elderly clients. The irony was perfect. Nicole specialized in gaining the trust of vulnerable people with money. Violet sent anonymous documents to Nicole's supervisor, detailing her criminal background and raising questions about several account transfers that showed suspicious patterns. She included just enough evidence to start an internal investigation without revealing her own involvement. By the end of the second week, both Ryan and Nicole were fielding uncomfortable questions from multiple sources. Ryan's business was hemorrhaging clients, and Nicole was placed on administrative leave pending a company investigation. But the real pressure came from an unexpected source: the police investigation into Violet's disappearance. Detective Sarah Williams had been assigned to the case, and unlike everyone else, she wasn't buying the grief-stricken husband act. Williams was a sharp investigator with 20 years of experience, and something about Ryan's story didn't sit right with her. Missing persons cases involving water are always suspicious, Williams told her partner during one of their recorded conversations that Mills intercepted. No body, no witnesses, just a conveniently distraught husband who stands to inherit everything. Williams began digging deeper into Ryan's background, and what she found raised red flags. His identity was too clean, too perfect. No credit history before 5 years ago, no school records, no childhood friends. It was as if Ryan Mitchell had materialized out of thin air. The detective also questioned the timeline of Violet's supposed mental breakdown. Medical records showed she'd been fine until 6 months ago, when she suddenly developed severe symptoms that didn't match any standard psychiatric condition. "I want to exhume her father's body," Williams told the district attorney. "If someone was poisoning the daughter, maybe they practiced on the father first." Violet read about this development in the local newspaper and felt a chill of vindication. She'd wondered about her father's sudden heart attack, coming just months after Ryan had started showing romantic interest in her. Now it seemed possible that their scheme had claimed 2 victims, not just one. While the police investigation slowly built momentum, Violet escalated her psychological warfare. She knew Ryan and Nicole's routines, their favorite places, their weaknesses. It was time to make them feel hunted. She started with their love nest at the Riverside Motel. Late one night, she slipped a manila envelope under their room door containing photos of them together, along with a note: "I know what you did." Mills' surveillance camera caught their reaction when they found the envelope. Ryan went pale, while Nicole immediately assumed they were being blackmailed by someone who'd discovered their affair. "Who could know?" Nicole demanded, pacing frantically around the small room. "Maybe someone saw us, figured out we were together before Violet disappeared," Ryan replied, but his voice was shaky. They spent hours analyzing the photos, trying to figure out who could have taken them and what they wanted. The not knowing was eating at them, exactly as Violet had planned. 3 days later she struck again. This time, she left evidence of their financial crimes in places where their former allies would find it. Ryan's business partner discovered detailed records of embezzlement in his car. Nicole's best friend found bank statements showing suspicious transfers taped to her front door. The anonymous evidence dumps were carefully calculated to destroy their support network. One by one, people who had offered comfort and assistance during Violet's tragedy began questioning whether they really knew Ryan and Nicole at all. But Violet's masterstroke came when she targeted their relationship directly. She'd learned from Mills' surveillance that they were planning to leave town soon, probably to disappear with her money before the police investigation got too serious. She couldn't let that happen. Using a voice modulator she'd purchased online, Violet called Nicole's phone while Nicole was at work. "I know you killed Violet Sterling," the disguised voice said. "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street tonight at midnight or I go to the police." Then she called Ryan with a similar message, but told him to come an hour earlier. That night, Violet watched from a safe distance as Ryan arrived at the abandoned warehouse, nervous and sweating. When Nicole showed up an hour later and found him there, their paranoia exploded into open conflict. Mills' audio equipment caught every word of their argument. "You got the call too?" Nicole demanded. "Why didn't you tell me? I was going to handle it myself." "We don't need any complications right now." "Handle it how? We can't keep playing these games. Someone knows what we did and they're toying with us." "Maybe we should just take what we can and leave tonight," Ryan suggested. "Forget the rest of the money. Are you insane? We've worked too hard for this. I'm not running because some amateur detective thinks they can scare us." They argued for another 20 minutes before realizing they'd been set up. No mysterious blackmailer appeared, no demands were made. Someone was playing psychological games with them and they had no idea who or why. As they drove away separately, both of them were looking over their shoulders, jumping at shadows. The predators had become prey, and they could feel invisible eyes watching their every move. Violet smiled in the darkness. They wanted to play mind games with an innocent woman? She'd show them what real psychological warfare looked like. The paranoia was eating them alive. Mills' surveillance showed Ryan and Nicole becoming increasingly erratic, their movements nervous and unpredictable. They'd started meeting in different locations, changing their phones frequently, and looking over their shoulders constantly. But the pressure was doing more than making them paranoid, it was making them sloppy. Detective Williams noticed the changes too. Guilty people act guilty, she told her partner during a stakeout outside Ryan's house. Look at him. 3 weeks ago he was the devastated husband organizing search parties. Now he jumps every time a car backfires. The police investigation was gaining momentum. The medical examiner had agreed to exhume Violet's father, and preliminary tests were showing traces of the same drug that Ryan had been giving Violet. Combined with the questions about Ryan's identity, Williams was building a case for murder. But she still needed Violet's body to prove the daughter's death, and that was the one thing she'd never find. From her various hideouts, Violet continued orchestrating the psychological pressure. She'd rented 3 different apartments under false names, never staying in one place long enough to establish a pattern. Mills helped her coordinate the surveillance and evidence planting, while Porter managed the continue legal aspects from a distance. The next phase of Violet's plan targeted their finances directly. She discovered that Ryan and Nicole had been moving her stolen inheritance through a complex network of accounts, planning to funnel it to an untraceable offshore bank. But every financial transaction left a digital footprint, and Violet had been documenting everything. She contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division anonymously, providing detailed evidence of the money laundering scheme. Federal agents were much harder to bribe or intimidate than local officials, and they had resources that local police couldn't match. Within days, Ryan's accounts were frozen pending investigation. The offshore transfers were blocked, and Nicole's investment firm was raided as part of a broader fraud inquiry. The money they'd worked so hard to steal was now completely out of reach. Ryan's reaction was swift and desperate. Mills caught him on audio talking to Nicole outside a gas station, his voice sharp with panic. They froze everything. Every account, every investment, even the business funds, were completely cut off. How is that possible? Nobody knew about the offshore setup. Someone knows. Someone's been watching us, learning our systems, and they're systematically destroying everything we built. Nicole's paranoia reached new heights. What if she's not really dead? What if Violet somehow figured it out and staged the whole thing? Don't be ridiculous. We saw her break down, remember? She was barely functional. There's no way she could orchestrate something this sophisticated. But doubt was creeping into Ryan's voice too. The woman they'd been manipulating had been grieving and drugged, easy to control. The person hunting them now was calculating and methodical, staying always one step ahead. Violet allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They were finally experiencing the helplessness and confusion they'd inflicted on her, watching their carefully planned lives crumble beyond their control. The psychological pressure intensified when Detective Williams brought them in for formal questioning. Violet watched the live stream Mills had hacked from the police station's security system, seeing Ryan and Nicole sitting in separate interrogation rooms. Williams started with Ryan. We've been looking into your background, Mr. Mitchell. Or should I call you Mr. Thompson? Ryan's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you mean. Ryan Thompson, wanted in Nevada and California for fraud and identity theft. Did you think we wouldn't figure it out? You're mistaken. I've lived here for 5 years, built a business, married a local woman. Check my records. Oh, we did. Very thorough records, all created around the same time. Almost like someone was building a fake identity from scratch. Williams let that sink in before continuing. Tell me about your wife's medical condition. When did her symptoms start? After her father died. The grief triggered some kind of breakdown. Interesting. Because her father's autopsy showed traces of the same drug you were giving your wife for her anxiety. Care to explain that? Ryan's lawyer immediately jumped in, ending the questioning. But the damage was done. Williams had made it clear she knew about the poisoning scheme, and now it was only a matter of building an airtight case. Nicole's interrogation was even more revealing. Without Ryan there to coordinate their story, she made several contradictions that Williams immediately caught. You said you moved here to be closer to family after your stepfather died. But Violet's father died 6 months after you arrived. Why move here before the death that supposedly motivated the move? Nicole scrambled to explain, but her story fell apart under scrutiny. Williams pressed harder, pointing out the inconsistencies in Nicole's account of Violet's mental health. You seem to know a lot about psychiatric conditions for someone with no medical training. Did you help choose your stepsister's medication? By the time both interrogations ended, Ryan and Nicole were shaken and suspicious of each other. They'd given conflicting accounts of several key events, and Williams had recorded every contradiction. That night, their paranoia boiled over into open conflict. Mill's surveillance caught them screaming at each other in Nicole's apartment. You told them about the medication, Ryan accused. I never said anything about helping choose what she took. I was trying to seem helpful. You're the one who screwed up the timeline about when I moved here. We need to stick to the story. If we contradict each other again, we're finished. Maybe we're already finished. Maybe we should just disappear tonight, take what cash we have left and run. But they couldn't run because they had no money left to run with. The accounts they'd spent months setting up were frozen, their assets were tied up in legal proceedings, and they were both unemployed and unemployable with criminal investigations hanging over them. They were trapped in the same town where they'd committed their crimes, forced to watch helplessly as their perfect plan collapsed around them. From her latest hideout, Violet monitored their breakdown with cold satisfaction. She'd learned their lesson well. The best way to destroy someone wasn't through violence or dramatic confrontation. It was through patience, precision, and turning their own methods against them. Ryan and Nicole had taught her that the most effective psychological torture was making someone question their own reality, feel hunted and helpless, watch their support system evaporate one betrayal at a time. Now they were getting a master class in their own techniques. The trap was nearly complete. Soon they would face the final phase of Violet's revenge, and discover that their victim had been the predator all along. 3 months after Violet's disappearance, the walls were closing in on Ryan and Nicole from every direction. Detective Williams had built a solid case for fraud and identity theft, the FBI was pursuing money laundering charges, and their former allies had completely abandoned them. But it was Bethany's arrival in town that triggered the final avalanche. Violet's best friend had taken a leave of absence from her medical residency to investigate her friend's disappearance personally. Unlike the local authorities, Bethany knew Violet intimately and could spot the inconsistencies in Ryan's story immediately. Violet never had anxiety attacks before her father died, Bethany told Detective Williams during their first meeting. She was one of the most mentally stable people I knew. For her to develop sudden onset psychosis doesn't make medical sense. Bethany had brought her own evidence, years of phone calls, text messages, and emails that painted a picture of a happy, healthy woman whose personality had changed drastically only in the past 6 months. Look at this, she said, showing Williams a text conversation from 2 weeks before Violet disappeared. She's asking me about drug interactions and side effects. Why would someone having a psychotic break be researching medication? Williams studied the messages. Violet had been asking very specific questions about drugs that could cause confusion and memory loss, and about how long various substances stayed in someone's system. The questions suggested someone who was trying to understand what was being done to them, not someone who was genuinely delusional. There's something else, Bethany continued. Violet called me the night before she disappeared. She sounded different, clearer, more focused than she'd been in months. She asked me to promise that if anything happened to her, I'd make sure the truth came out. That phone call had been recorded on Bethany's voicemail system, and the voice analysis was telling. Violet sounded lucid and determined, not like someone on the verge of suicide. Armed with Bethany's evidence, Williams got approval to search Ryan and Nicole's properties more thoroughly. What she found in Nicole's apartment was damning: medical literature about psychiatric drugs, printed emails discussing Violet's treatment, and financial documents showing the systematic liquidation of Violet's assets. But the smoking gun was found in Ryan's home office, a detailed timeline of their plan including target dates for Violet's commitment and asset transfer. Ryan had been so confident in his scheme that he documented every step, creating a perfect roadmap for prosecutors. The arrests happened simultaneously. Ryan was taken into custody at his office, while Nicole was arrested at the grocery store, both caught completely off guard by the coordinated operation. Local news coverage was extensive, and the details that emerged shocked the community. The grieving husband and supportive stepsister were revealed to be con artists who'd systematically destroyed an innocent woman's life for money. But the biggest shock came when Detective Williams held a press conference announcing new developments in the case. "We believe Violet Sterling may still be alive," Williams announced to the packed room of reporters. Evidence suggests her disappearance was staged, possibly as an escape from the psychological and physical abuse she was suffering. The statement was carefully calculated. Williams didn't have proof that Violet was alive, but she suspected it based on the lack of a body and the sophisticated nature of the evidence that kept appearing. By announcing the possibility publicly, she was sending a message to Violet that it was safe to come forward. Violet watched the press conference from yet another motel room, feeling a mix of vindication and apprehension. The truth was finally coming out, but her own role in the investigation was about to become much more complicated. That evening, Porter called her secure phone with an update on the legal situation. They're both in custody, but they'll likely make bail soon. The prosecutor wants to meet with you. She thinks your testimony could seal the case. What about the charges against me for faking my death? There are no charges. You're legally classified as missing, not dead. And given what they did to you, any prosecutor would consider your disappearance self-defense. 2 days later, Violet made her decision. She called Detective Williams directly, identifying herself and arranging a discreet meeting. They met at a small diner outside town, with Mills providing security and Porter handling the legal aspects. Williams took one look at Violet and shook her head in amazement. You're supposed to be crazy. Ryan painted you as barely functional. I was barely functional when they were drugging me. But I got better fast once I stopped taking their medication. Violet laid out the entire story, supported by months of evidence she'd collected. Williams listened with growing anger as the scope of Ryan and Nicole's manipulation became clear. They didn't just steal your money, Williams said finally. They tried to steal your entire identity, your sanity, your life. That's why I couldn't just report them and walk away. They would have done this to someone else and the next victim might not survive. So you decided to destroy them instead. I decided to give them exactly what they gave me, the experience of having their reality systematically dismantled by someone they underestimated. Williams studied Violet's face. You're not the same person who disappeared 3 months ago. No, I'm not. They turned me into someone who could fight back. They just didn't expect me to be better at it than they were. The meeting lasted 4 hours, with Violet providing detailed testimony about every aspect of the conspiracy. When it was over, Williams had enough evidence to put Ryan and Nicole away for decades. There's just one more thing, Williams said as they prepared to leave. The media circus is going to be intense when this goes to trial. Are you ready for that? Violet thought about all the nights she'd lain awake wondering if she was losing her mind, all the times she'd trusted people who were systematically betraying her, all the other women who'd suffered because no one had stopped Ryan and Nicole before. I'm ready, she said. Let them see what their victim really looks like. The trial of Ryan Thompson, aka Ryan Mitchell, and Nicole Stevens began 6 months later, and it became the biggest story the small town had ever seen. National news crews descended on the courthouse as details of their elaborate scheme captured public attention. Violet took the witness stand on the third day, and her testimony was devastating. She spoke calmly and clearly about the systematic poisoning, the psychological manipulation and the financial fraud, presenting evidence that left no doubt about their guilt. They turned my grief into a weapon against me, she testified. They used my love for my father and my trust in my husband to slowly destroy my sense of reality. The defense tried to paint Violet as an unstable woman seeking revenge, but their argument fell apart under cross-examination. Bethany's medical testimony proved that Violet's symptoms were consistent with drug-induced psychosis, not mental illness. Mills presented surveillance evidence of Ryan and Nicole's celebrations and planning meetings. Porter documented the financial manipulation in exhausting detail. But the most damaging testimony came from Ryan's previous victims. 2 women who'd survived similar schemes agreed to testify about their experiences. Their stories were heartbreakingly similar to Violet's. The gradual erosion of their mental health, the financial manipulation, the isolation from friends and family. He made me think I was going crazy, testified Rebecca Martinez, Ryan's second wife. By the time I realized what was happening, I'd lost my business, my house, and almost my life. I spent 2 years in psychiatric facilities before I could prove I'd been drugged. The jury listened in horror as the full pattern of Ryan and Nicole's crimes emerged. This wasn't just fraud, it was a systematic assault on vulnerable women, designed to destroy their lives completely. Ryan's defense attorney tried one last desperate strategy, suggesting that Violet had somehow orchestrated her own disappearance as an elaborate revenge plot. But the timeline didn't support this theory. Violet couldn't have predicted her father's death or Ryan's decision to accelerate their plan. My client may have made mistakes, Ryan's lawyer argued, but staging your own disappearance and terrorizing people with anonymous threats isn't the behavior of an innocent victim. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh destroyed this argument in her closing statement. Violet Sterling didn't commit any crimes, Walsh told the jury. She escaped from people who were slowly killing her, and she gathered evidence to make sure they couldn't do it to anyone else. If that's not self-defense, then what is? Walsh methodically reviewed the evidence against Ryan and Nicole, the identity theft, the financial fraud, the drugging scheme, the conspiracy to have Violet committed. She showed the jury photos of Ryan's previous victims, reminding them that Violet was just the latest target in a long pattern of predatory behavior. These defendants didn't just steal money, Walsh concluded. They stole lives, sanity, and hope from women who trusted them. Violet Sterling survived because she was stronger and smarter than they expected. But the woman who died in a psychiatric facility, the one who disappeared without a trace, they didn't survive. How many more victims would there have been if Violet hadn't fought back? The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Ryan was found guilty on all counts: identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, and money laundering. The judge sentenced him to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Nicole received 28 years for her role in the conspiracy. Her defense that she was just following Ryan's lead fell flat when prosecutors showed evidence that she'd been the mastermind behind several aspects of the scheme. But the real victory came when the judge addressed them directly before sentencing. "You preyed on women during their most vulnerable moments," Judge Harrison said. "You turned love, trust, and grief into weapons. You didn't just steal money, you stole identities, memories, and years of life from your victims. This court has seen many crimes, but few as calculated and cruel as yours." After the sentencing, Violet stood outside the courthouse facing a crowd of reporters. She'd prepared a brief statement, knowing this would be her only public comment on the case. "I want to thank Detective Williams, District Attorney Walsh, and everyone who helped bring Ryan Thompson and Nicole Stevens to justice," she began. "But mostly, I want other women to know that if something feels wrong in your relationship, trust your instincts. If people are telling you you're crazy when you feel sane, if you're losing time and memory but feeling fine when you're alone, if your finances are being handled by someone else, for your own good, get help. Get away. Don't let anyone convince you that your reality isn't real." A reporter called out, "Do you regret disappearing instead of going to police immediately?" Violet considered the question carefully. "I regret that it took so long for the truth to come out. But I don't regret making sure Ryan and Nicole couldn't do this to anyone else. Sometimes you have to disappear to find out who you really are." That evening, Violet sat in Porter's office, finally able to reclaim her legal identity and her inheritance. The money Ryan and Nicole had stolen was being returned, along with substantial damages from their assets. "What will you do now?" Porter asked. Violet looked out the window at the town where she'd nearly lost everything. "I'm thinking of starting a foundation. Help other women who've been through similar situations. Make sure they have resources and support." "Using your father's business?" "Using everything. The money, the business, my experience. Dad always said the best revenge was living well. I think he'd approve of this plan." As she drove home that night, to the house she'd finally reclaimed, Violet thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago. Confused, frightened, slowly being erased by people she trusted. That woman was gone forever. In her place was someone who'd learned that the best way to fight monsters was to become something they couldn't understand or control. Ryan and Nicole had tried to destroy her. Instead, they'd created their own worst nightmare. A victim who refused to stay silent, who fought back with their own weapons, and who'd made sure they could never hurt anyone else. Justice, Violet thought, tasted even sweeter than revenge. 1 year after the trial, Violet stood in the lobby of the Sterling Foundation headquarters, watching as volunteers helped their latest client, a woman who'd escaped a similar psychological manipulation scheme 3 states away. The foundation had grown faster than anyone expected. Word spread quickly through networks of survivors, social workers, and law enforcement agencies. Women who'd been isolated, gaslit, and financially abused found a place that not only believed their stories but had the resources to help them fight back. "We've got 3 new cases this week," Bethany said, walking up with a stack of files. After completing her residency, she'd moved back to town to serve as the foundation's medical director. 2 drugging cases similar to yours and 1 elaborate identity theft scheme. Violet took the files, scanning the details. Each story was heartbreakingly familiar. Vulnerable women targeted by sophisticated predators who specialized in psychological warfare. "Have you heard from Detective Williams?" Bethany asked. She called yesterday. Ryan's been moved to maximum security after trying to run a financial scam from prison. Apparently, he convinced another inmate to help him target pen pals. Some people never learned. But that was why the foundation existed. To make sure their victims had advocates who understood exactly how these predators operated. Violet's phone buzzed with a text from Mills, who now worked full-time for the Foundation's security division. Coffee shop, 3 p.m. Someone you should meet. Intrigued, Violet arrived at the small cafe to find Mills sitting with a tall man in his 40s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. Violet, meet Dr. James Crawford. He runs a similar organization in California. James stood as she approached. Miss Sterling, I've been following your work with great interest. What you've built here is remarkable. They spent the next 2 hours discussing their respective organizations. James had started his foundation after his sister was murdered by a boyfriend who'd systematically isolated her from family and friends. Like Violet, he'd learned that the best way to honor a victim was to protect future ones. I have a proposition, James said as their meeting wound down. We're opening a new facility in Denver. It would combine residential treatment for abuse survivors with a training center for law enforcement and social workers. We need someone with your experience to run it. Violet was intrigued but cautious. I appreciate the offer, but my work is here. Actually, Bethany interrupted, having joined them during the conversation, the board's been discussing expansion. This could be perfect timing. Over the following weeks, Violet found herself spending more time with James as they planned the Denver facility. He was intelligent, passionate about his work, and completely genuine, qualities she'd learned to recognize and value. Unlike Ryan's calculated charm, James' interest in her was straightforward and honest. He didn't try to manage her emotions or make decisions for her. Instead, he listened to her ideas, challenged her thinking, and supported her independence. You know, Bethany observed one evening as they reviewed applications for the Denver program, you're different when you're around James. Relaxed. Happy. Violet looked up from her paperwork. I'm happy with my work. This is different. You smile differently when he calls. It was true. James had awakened feelings Violet thought were gone forever. The ability to trust, to be vulnerable without being weak, to let someone close without losing herself. Their first real date happened almost by accident. They'd been working late on grant applications when James suggested getting dinner. What started as a working meal turned into hours of conversation about everything except work. Tell me something that's not in your foundation biography, James said over dessert. I used to want to be a teacher, Violet admitted. Elementary school. I thought I'd spend my life helping kids learn to read. What changed? Life. Dad needed help with the business, then he died, then. She gestured vaguely at the complexity of everything that had happened. Do you ever regret not pursuing it? Violet considered the question. No. I think I found my real calling. Just took a more complicated path to get there. James reached across the table and touched her hand gently. Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who've learned the hardest lessons. 6 months later, the Denver facility opened with James and Violet as co-directors. The Sterling Crawford Center became a model for victim advocacy programs nationwide, combining immediate crisis intervention with long-term support and legal assistance. Violet found herself building a new life she'd never imagined. The work was challenging but fulfilling, and her relationship with James grew stronger as they collaborated on cases and shared the emotional weight of helping trauma survivors. One evening, as they walked through downtown Denver after a successful fundraising event, James stopped in front of a small park. There's something I want to tell you, he said, taking her hands. When I first heard your story, I was amazed by your strength and intelligence. But getting to know you, working with you, Violet, you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met. She felt her chest tighten with familiar fear, the response that had been trained into her by months of manipulation and betrayal. James noticed immediately. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just want you to know that I see you, the real you, and I'm not going anywhere. That night, for the first time since her nightmare with Ryan began, Violet allowed herself to imagine a future built on genuine love and mutual respect. Not the desperate gratitude of a victim, not the calculated romance of a predator's scheme, but the quiet certainty of two people who'd found their match. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, James replied. If you weren't scared, I'd worry you weren't taking this seriously. They stood in the park for a long time, talking about their fears, their hopes, and the kind of partnership they wanted to build. It was the opposite of every conversation she'd ever had with Ryan. Honest, equal, and focused on building something together rather than one person controlling the other. 3 months later, when James proposed during a quiet dinner at home, Violet said yes without hesitation. She'd learned the difference between love and manipulation, between partnership and possession. This time she was choosing someone who made her stronger, not weaker. Someone who supported her independence rather than trying to destroy it. The woman who'd nearly been erased by psychological warfare had become someone who could spot predators from across a room and help their victims fight back. She turned her trauma into purpose, her pain into power. And now, she was ready to build something beautiful on the foundation of everything she'd survived. 5 years after her death and resurrection, Violet stood at the window of her Denver office, looking out at the mountains while reviewing the week's case files. The Sterling Crawford Center had helped over 2,000 women escape psychological and financial abuse, and their training programs had educated law enforcement agencies across the country. Her phone rang. Detective Williams, now retired but still a friend and occasional consultant for difficult cases. "Turn on Channel 7, Williams said without preamble. "You're going to want to see this." Violet found the remote and switched to the local news station. The anchor was discussing a parole hearing, and Ryan's photo appeared on screen. Ryan Thompson, convicted of fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder in what prosecutors called one of the most elaborate psychological manipulation schemes in state history, was denied parole today after serving 5 years of his 35-year sentence. The report showed footage of Ryan, now graying and thin, being led back to his cell. He looked nothing like the confident predator who'd nearly destroyed her life. Prison had aged him decades, and his attempts to manipulate other inmates and even prison staff had earned him enemies throughout the system. In related news, the anchor continued, his co-conspirator Nicole Stevens died in federal prison last month from complications related to a drug overdose. Stevens had been serving a 28-year sentence for her role in the conspiracy. Violet felt a moment of sadness, not for Nicole, but for the waste of a life that could have been used for good instead of harm. Then the feeling passed. Nicole had made her choices, and those choices had led to their natural conclusion. The news report shifted to an interview with the parole board chairman. Mr. Thompson has shown no remorse for his crimes and continues to maintain his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. He's also been disciplined multiple times for attempting to manipulate other inmates and staff. Frankly, he represents exactly the kind of predatory behavior our parole system is designed to prevent from returning to society. After the report ended, Violet sat quietly for a moment, processing how she felt. Vindicated, certainly. Satisfied that justice had been served. But mostly she felt grateful for how far she'd come. Her assistant knocked and entered with a schedule update. "The documentary crew wants to interview you tomorrow about the new training program." And James called, "He's running late for dinner but he'll meet you at home." Oh. Violet smiled at the word. She and James had married 2 years ago in a simple ceremony surrounded by the chosen family they'd built through their work. Survivors, advocates, law enforcement allies, and the medical professionals who specialized in treating psychological trauma. Their marriage was everything her relationship with Ryan hadn't been, built on mutual respect, honest communication, and shared values. James never tried to manage her emotions or make decisions for her. Instead, he supported her independence while offering partnership when she wanted it. That evening, they cooked dinner together while discussing their latest cases. It was a routine that had become precious to Violet. The simple pleasure of sharing daily life with someone who truly saw and valued her. "I heard about Ryan's parole hearing," James said as they cleaned up. "How do you feel about it?" "Honestly, I barely thought about him. It feels like something that happened to someone else." "In a way it did. You're not the same person who married him." It was true. The frightened, manipulated woman who'd discovered that devastating phone call was gone. In her place was someone who'd learned that survival wasn't enough. You had to transform your pain into purpose, your trauma into strength. "Speaking of transformation," James said, pulling an envelope from his jacket, "this came today." Inside was a letter from Rebecca Martinez, one of Ryan's previous victims who'd testified at the trial. She'd become a therapist specializing in abuse recovery and had recently opened her own practice. "Dear Violet," the letter read, "I wanted you to know that I just celebrated 5 years of freedom from the nightmare Ryan put me through. Your courage in fighting back and exposing his crimes saved my life and probably countless others. I'm now helping other survivors find their strength, just like you showed me was possible. Thank you for refusing to be a victim and teaching all of us that we could be survivors instead. With gratitude and admiration, Rebecca." Violet folded the letter carefully, adding it to the collection she kept of similar messages from women who'd found hope through her story. "That's why it was all worth it," she told James. Not the revenge, not even the justice. The fact that other women don't have to go through what I did alone. Later that evening, as they walked through their neighborhood, Violet reflected on the unexpected turns her life had taken. She'd started as a small-town librarian who'd inherited her father's business. She'd nearly been destroyed by sophisticated predators who'd turned her love and trust into weapons against her. But she'd survived, fought back, and built something meaningful from the wreckage of her old life. The Sterling Crawford Center had become a national model for victim advocacy. She'd helped pass legislation making psychological manipulation a specific crime. She'd testified before Congress about the need for better protections for abuse survivors. Most importantly, she'd learned that you could be victimized without becoming a victim. You could be targeted by predators without being destroyed by them. You could lose everything you thought defined you and discover that your real strength had been there all along, just waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. "Penny, for your thoughts," James said, noticing her contemplative mood. "Just thinking about how strange life is. 5 years ago, I thought my world was ending. Now I can't imagine any other life. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Ryan's phone hadn't stayed connected that night?" Violet considered the question. "I probably would have ended up committed, lost everything, maybe even died in an institution like one of his other victims. But eventually, someone else would have figured out his pattern and stopped him." "You sound very certain about that." "I am. Because that's how these stories end when good people refuse to look the other way. Ryan and Nicole thought they were so clever, but they underestimated everyone around them. The police, the prosecutors, the survivors who came forward. Evil people always think they're smarter than everyone else, right up until the moment they're proven wrong." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the evening air and the peace of their shared life. Back home, Violet checked her secure email and found a message from Mills, who now ran security for multiple survivor advocacy organizations. "Thought you'd want to know," the message read. "Ryan's cellmate reported that he's been trying to get addresses for women who testified against him. Prison officials are taking appropriate measures, but wanted you to be aware. Some people never learn." Violet forwarded the message to the appropriate authorities and made a note to warn the other survivors. Even behind bars, Ryan was still trying to manipulate and control people. But he'd lost his power to frighten her. She'd learned that the best defense against predators was knowledge, preparation, and a support network of people who understood the tactics. As she prepared for bed, Violet caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at her was confident, clear-eyed, and peaceful. It was the face of someone who'd been tested by fire and emerged stronger. She'd started this journey as a victim, become a survivor, and transformed into something more, an advocate, a protector, a voice for those who couldn't yet speak for themselves. Ryan Thompson had tried to erase her existence and steal her life. Instead, he'd helped her discover who she really was underneath all the fear and doubt he'd cultivated. The ultimate irony was that in trying to destroy her, he'd created his own worst enemy. Someone who understood his methods intimately and had dedicated her life to making sure they could never be used again. That, Violet thought as she turned off the light, was the sweetest victory of all.